Sit with Lexi B.
Hey fam, welcome back to Sit with Lexi B podcast. My name is Lexi B and I am so honored that you're here, hanging out with us, talking to us, communicating with us, and being part of our community. In this episode, we are talking to Pagels Minor. Pagels Minor not only is a tech executive, they have worked at some of the most consumer-based tech industries in the whole entire world. Google it, okay? We're talking about Netflix. We're talking about Apple. They have also dabbled in some political stuff. And we are really talking about that boardroom confidence. You know, the kids on the streets may call it some big D energy, but we try to keep it cute here. So, boardroom confidence. The point is that many times in these corporate places, the people that are actually being heard and the people that are actually making moves from a financial standpoint, promotions and things like that, they just have the confidence to do it. Sometimes even when they don't have the intelligence to do it. And that may be a separate episode. But the point is, you really need confidence in your career. You need to believe it to achieve it. And I know that sounds like a Hallmark card, but it's actually really, really true. So tune in, stay tuned, as B and I discuss what this boardroom confidence looks like, what this big D energy looks like, and how to actually use it to your advantage.
Sit with Lexi B podcast.
Welcome, B. How are you?
I am doing well.
Fantastic. I'm so honored to talk with you, not only because of just the amazing things you do in the world, which we are going to talk about, but because I actually have a personal relationship with you. We are actually friends.
And that's a big deal because, I don't really call many people my friend. I know lots of people call us friends, but, I have such specific rules about what a friend is. And I'm like, are you? Because I would not drop everything for you.
See?
And I only do that for friends.
The feeling is mutual. So before we get started, what is in your coffee cup? What are you drinking with us today?
Okay, so I'm actually terrible. So this is actually water, like a proper user. This is water. Also, shout out to 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐬, great program. Okay. Everyone should check them out. They're amazing. But then I also have a cherry Pepsi because this is like my cheat thing. And I've been so good and I was like, I just really want a cherry Pepsi. But I do the mini ones because I try to do it in, small portions.
Is cherry Pepsi your favorite soda?
No, regular Pepsi is my favorite. Okay. Cherry Pepsi is like, okay, I'm feeling a little sassy today. Like, let's mix it up.
I asked because cherry Coke is my all-time favorite soda.
Also, if I told you my all-time favorite, and so you're from the South, so well, I mean, you're from close enough to the South, if some people disagree. So, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐬 peach soda. That is my
That's a good one, though.
Of all time.
Whenever I'm in the South visiting family, I will partake because it's only in the South. For folks who don't know,
well, it's only in the South, and it's only in like the area where you might have to be a little nervous.
Yes.
And so, I roll in there with my cousins. I'm like, you know what? We're getting a case of this 99-cent liquid gold because it is so delicious.
Yes.
And then, stop and get you some, Jack Pearl's chicken.
Yep.
Right.
Some Bluebell ice cream. I love.
Oh my gosh. And then some Dixie Queen.
And some
And when you go home.
And
yes, with some Dixie Queen.
Yes. And
I'm pretty sure Dixie Queen has never cleaned anything, but it tastes so good.
But that's having vaccinations. And then I also want to add, if you're country enough, you know about Shoney's and Piccadilly.
Yes.
And everybody knows Crackle Barrel. And I'm like, Crackle Barrel doesn't really show how country you are. If you know Shoney's and Piccadilly.
Yes.
Then
Well, and I would add also Ryan's.
Yeah.
Because those biscuits, oh my gosh, to this day. My mom was like, you don't even like bread. I was like, I like this bread. I would get the steak and I would just eat that bread and I would just eat my weight in that bread every single time. I mean, now you couldn't get me to eat at a buffet if my life depended on it. So that's what's funny about all of this. How times have changed.
Yes, because when I was little, I could tear up a Shoney's. And now I'm like, you want me to eat eggs that have been sitting out on a buffet for hours while people cough all over it. But B, we were 90s kids. So we just threw craziness to the wind. We're going to survive.
And, and we did. And now we completely make sure our kids don't have to suffer through this. Okay, so a drop off today, it was so funny because I finally met, like, so I'm starting to actually socialize with other parents, which, by the way, anyone who's listening to this who has kids understands that this is like a whole process, because you have to become friends with the parents. Like, you don't really have a choice. And it's super awkward because it's like really hard to make friends as an adult. Right. And it's even harder when the only reason you're making friends is because of your kid. And so really you're just hoping that they don't suck, right? You know, like, what if they are like the weirdest, like most awkward people? And so these two people, I had seen them many times. They seem to moisturize. They seem to like talk to their kids in a firm tone. Like, they don't hit them. Like, I could tell they don't hit them. But they were like, you know, they put that deep voice on it. So I was like, so they obviously were raised right? Because you got, like, because their kids would stop when they do that voice. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, cool. So I finally had a conversation because honestly, and this is going to sound terrible, but again, anyone who is a parent who has kids now will know this. So like the little, say, teachers over in the corner talking to a parent, and they're like, yeah, you know, we really need to get this under control because this time she bit and she was hitting. And I was just like, thank God that's not my kid. Like, that's literally like the first thing you think is like, thank God that is not my kid. And so like I was going over and I was like, I just got to tell somebody this. And so the mom was sitting there and we had made eye contact. I was like, you know, I just got to share this with you. I was like, am I the only one who's just like, that's what she's like, yes. He was like, one time, she was like, he was going through this period and he bit, and she was like, we got calls all like 3 times. She was like, I've never been more embarrassed in my life. I was like, right. Well, you know, it was, I said, girl, we're not supposed to be go that far, but you know, it was weird. But we actually connected. It turns out they're from New York, and no wonder we get along.
So speaking of where people are from, where are you from? Where are y'all people from?
So, my people. Actually, it's so funny because, like, I started, like, messing with people when I answered this question, because I did one of those African ancestry tests. And so my African ancestry test, it said I'm from Cameroon. So I was like, I'm from Cameroon. And someone was like, well, you don't have an accent. And I was like, no.
You're not. I did that test, and I found out that I was 18% British. What? And so sometimes when people tell me or ask me that question, and I'm like, I don't know about you, I'll be like, I am related to the royal family of Britain. And her face just...
I had mostly Irish and Scottish and a little bit of British. And I was like, so that Irish, like, explains a lot of, like, my vindictiveness. It's like, I never get angry. But once I do get angry, I'm like, I wonder if I could destroy everything they've ever created. Yeah. Right. But no, originally, I'm a Mississippian, you know. Yeah. It actually was so funny because I was in some other... Where was I recently? I was like in California. I was here in California recently, and someone was from Arkansas, and I was like, oh, wow. I was like, that's super cool. I was like, you know, I never get to that. He's like, I'm so happy that you're Southern. He's like, would you understand it's not that big a deal to be from Arkansas? I was like, right. Like, we go places all the time. There's planes. There's restaurants. Like, Gucci can ship to me too, right? It don't matter where you are. Mail works, right? You know what I'm saying? And I probably have more money than you because I spend less on other stuff, right? So it was really nice. So Mississippi is where I call my original home. Tennessee is where I did a lot of my youth, so like elementary school, middle school, or high school. So I like to tell people I'm a Mississippian or a Tennessee or something like that, because I kind of call both of them home. And, you know, those are my favorite places. But then my adopted home city is Chicago. So that's where I went to school. That's where I really love. It's like I was just there, and it was just like, it just re-energizes me. It's like Chicago is, you know, what my blood might actually be made of. So it's been really, really nice getting back there too. But currently I'm in LA. It's growing on me.
I've never met somebody who's not from LA, but lives in LA and says, oh, I love it. It's usually like, it's growing on me. Or my favorite line is like, well, the work is here. And I'm like, oh.
I think, you know, it's definitely one of those places that you have to find community. I mean, but you have to find community wherever you are, right? And I think that's the thing that people forget. Like, they expect, you know, people to pop up and say, hey, you're cool, let's hang out. But that's not how the world works, right? People generally go, hey, like, I, you know, am tired too. And I don't really know if I want to go out on a Tuesday, even if I might meet, you know, Lupita Nyong'o, right? Like, it doesn't matter who it is, right? Like, I just need to rest.
So today we are talking to you about establishing and igniting the confidence you need to actually be successful in your career, right? Mm-hmm. Some people may call it big D energy, right? Mm-hmm. I fully support, by the way. But really, if you're going to walk this walk, you got to talk this talk, and you got to twerk this twerk. And the people who are very successful, and how we define success in this conversation is financially successful, maybe climbing up the ladder in a corporate space, may not be the smartest person in the room, but they can walk the walk, they can talk the talk, and they can twerk the twerk.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you, when was the first time that you maybe not have ignited this, but you realized it was necessary for you to move the way you want to move in your career?
It's really interesting because for me, it kind of coincided with kind of becoming somewhat of a thought leader, right? Or having people start to think of me as a thought leader. So what essentially happened was that, I wasn't very satisfied in my career. So as a result, I was looking for opportunities to mentor folks or get mentorship or to join other organizations. And so as I started doing that, people were like, oh, you should come talk to my team. And so when I would talk to that team, they'd be like, oh, you're so great, you should apply here. But I would never actually get the job. And it was like always so fascinating to me because they'd be like, well, you're not strategic enough. And I was like, well, how can I not be strategic enough if like the session I just did with you was on strategy? Like it doesn't make sense.
A lot of times people say that when they don't even understand what strategic means. But go ahead.
Actually, it's so funny because my first blog was called Strategery in Technology. Because I was just like, well, if they're not going to say I know strategy, I'm going to write about it. But that really was the point. It really came down to, like, I'm really tired of people saying that I don't have this skill or I don't have this thing. When the reality is, I just didn't look like them. I didn't have the same bravado and things like that. And it's actually when I first started deciding that I was cool with getting tattoos as well, right? So I used to like be super like khakis, a polo shirt. Like it was gross. It was gross. Like honestly, like Clark shoes. My Wallabies were cool because they are comfortable. But I had them in like every color because they had to blend with the khakis.
Okay.
And so then I was just like, honestly, like if I were to talk about who I would be, I was like, I'm always, like tattooed. Maybe I'll get one, right? And I just started just like building the person that I wanted to be. And so the easier it became to like look like myself on the outside, the easier it became to have the big D energy, right? Because I was like, man, like I feel really good. And so that's an important part of this. You cannot have you actually can't fake big D energy, right? And that's actually what's funny about this. Because like when people look at, I hate to say the word, less intelligent people, right, who are in positions of leadership, they'll go, oh my gosh, the person doesn't deserve it. Like, that's like, this just absolutely rude, like blah, 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 blah. I'm like, but is that true? Like they were able to create an environment or a circumstance or some kind of allure that made people believe they can do this, right? So they're a leading storyteller, right? And they probably got you to co-opt their story by helping them do the work, right? So that means they're actually probably a pretty decent leader, right? They're pretty decent in negotiation, and you're not, honestly.
Some of the best leaders that have led me cannot do my job. Mm-hmm. I do not think that you being able to do the job makes you a good leader.
I mean, honestly, if you think about it, the best leaders are just people who ask questions most effectively.
And empower you to answer those questions, right?
Exactly. One of the things that, like, so I know some brilliant people. In fact, now that I'm in VC, like, the number of, like, PhD, like, invented something that, like, holy cow, like, is sitting next to me is, like, it literally happens, like, every day. Like, it's just, like, it's insane, right? And so what I found from that, though, is that if you ask them what they do, they'll be like, well, so sometimes I do this thing and like blah, 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 blah. And then their partner will come over and say, yeah, she a rocket scientist. She got 3 patents and like she the only reason we can go to the moon. And you'll be like, girl, like you the moon? Right? And it's just like this idea of like, why would you ever think anyone is going to give you anything if you can't even tell your story right? Right? And so when I go into the room, I tell people, like in my head, because like, again, I'm Southern. Actually, my daddy's a preacher too. And so I was around a lot of these like deacons and bishops. And so, the 2 big old Steve Harvey suits with the Stacey Adams shoes, right? And when I went to a room.
But fabulous orators and fabulous stories.
Yes, but not just that.
People don't give, I think, Southern churches enough credit. Regardless of what you believe in religiously, walk into a Southern Black church and you will be mind blown at what storytelling looks like. And so for you having a father in that seat and growing up in that culture, I can only imagine what kind of confidence was grown and ensued in you. Because that's how we talk. That's how Black folks in the South talk, right?
Exactly. And then I was like the weird kid, so it was like very interesting for me. But no, what I tell people, like I'm in that suit with the Stacey Adams, and I put that first foot down, and I know the whole, like, everybody stops, right? Right. Like, I know. I mean, but that's also like why I dress the way I dress, right? That's why I look the way I look. That's why I'm unapologetic about everything, right? Because when I walk into the room, I got big D energy, right? Because there's no space where I'm uncomfortable. And as soon as you start doing that, everything changes, right? And so then all of a sudden, you don't have to go looking for many opportunities. A lot of times they come looking for you, right? You know, when I was at Netflix, they used to say, like, you know, your reputation is that you just get shit done. And I was like, well, it just seems like people want to do what I tell them to do, so it works out.
But it sounds like in order to activate this confidence in your career, you really have to activate it in yourself and really come to terms with what is your most authentic self, what layers of identity that you want to put forward that just make you feel confident. How do we start there? Because it sounds like we have to start there. So what are your tips and tricks? How do we encourage people to say, hey, figure out who you are and just go for it?
Yeah, so this is actually like my first big talk, right? It's this idea of this like authenticity being your superpower. And one of the first things I always tell people is to do the root analysis of yourself, right? If you had to do a SWOT analysis of your own life, you know, what would that look like? And if you started to look at those pros and cons for why many of those things exist, of those things, which things would you change? Which things would you double down on? And which things, for instance, would you say, like, I just don't have it and I wish I had it? For me, you know, I liked follow through. That was like my number one issue, right? It was never that I was a smart person. I was charming, but I just never had what it took to like always consistently follow through. And so then when I was doing research, everyone's like, oh, well, you know, a lot of times the person just follows through. And I was like, well, darn. I was like, I had to start setting alarms for myself, right? To make sure I would follow through and things like that. And I think the second part of that too is also like, there's no such thing as like stealing when it comes to great leaders, right? And so I started just like reading about like all my favorite leaders. So like, you know, Tim Cook, right? You know, Barack Obama, actually more Michelle Obama with a little bit of Barack on the side. I can't help it. I love Michelle. Honestly, if Michelle,
because in my head, Michelle was actually the first Black president, but like that's just a whole pocket.
Yes, because honestly, look at what she did with that scrawny kid. She made him a president.
See,
I'm just saying. That's why, you know, like people are like, who, living or dead? Like when they say living, I'm like, okay, Michelle Obama, because I want to know how she did that magic. But I just started reading about these people, right? Or even Socrates, because like I realized that like I would always get these interesting reviews as a manager of people that was like, sometimes people don't feel like you listen, right? So it's a Socratic method. You got to ask a lot of questions. And then what I also realized, if I just kept asking questions, actually people stopped asking me for answers as well. So it was great. So, you know, it was like, okay, well now I'm empowering everyone. And now I get to do what I like to do, which is strategy. Like, and that's funny because that's what I actually wanted to do the whole time, right? And so what I also love about that is that once I started taking up that space, like it gave people, it gave me the ability to also hold people accountable. So then suddenly I wasn't doing all the scut work and always the person who had to take on that project or whatever, because I'd say, no, that's your thing, right? Like that you signed up for it. You shouldn't have signed up for it. I'm focused on this thing because it's going to deliver value. And I also started using that language because, you know, once I started looking at leaders who succeed, I was like, what do they talk like and what do they not? And actually, it's really funny because, like, people think I'm loud, right? But if you actually ever in a meeting with me, like, I'm just, like, one of the quietest people in the whole world. Because I realized...
Me too! Because I am a Capricorn, so I like to observe everything. I want to see that one twitch in that one eye. right? I want to see what people say and how you respond to it. But there is something very powerful in silence. And again, also, people think that I'm the loud one in the room, and I'm usually just like, I'm gonna sit here and watch y'all.
Exactly. And I love when they lean in, right? Because they also realize that if you decide to talk, it's a big deal. And so everyone leans in a little bit closer, and you get to be like, so I really just disagree with this statement, because if you look at the data, blah, 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 and you get to look back and you get to chill, and I love that. I love being able to control the space, because once you start to be able to control the space, you can actually create great outcomes.
I distinctly remember when I started gaining confidence in my career, and it was literally a year after I started working. So 3 weeks after college graduation, I started working at this company. We're not going to name it. And I was there for a year, and I hated every minute of it. And my manager and I did not get along. I will say, looking back and going to therapy, that I think that she is a great manager for people who are not new college grads.
Yeah.
I would give that feedback. But I was 22. I was young.
Most people are like that.
Exactly. And I got put on a PIP. And for folks who don't know, a PIP is a performance improvement plan. It's literally the step before you get fired.
Yeah.
And I remember
no one comes back from them.
No one comes back from it, but I did. And I think the reason why I did was that in that first year, because I had no clue what I was doing, and I really didn't have a great manager that was great at managing new college grads, I decided to emulate every adult in the room that I deemed as powerful. Mm-hmm. And then I get that PIP, and I realized that I spent the last 12 months trying to be everyone else instead of being myself. And I remember the next day after that PIP, I literally was like, you know what? F it. Y'all gonna fire me, whether if I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. So I started being my authentic self, and it saved my career.
Well, and I want to add to that, because I think something that you like, going back to this idea of authenticity, it's very difficult for people to trust inauthentic people, right? Because you always know, like for me, for instance, when I first started my career, I would never tell anyone I was gay, right? Which honestly, considering how I dressed and my attitude, it didn't really, I don't know why I thought that was going to be effective, but whatever. So, but I would always be like the gender neutral pronouns, things like that. And so it also meant that no one ever asked me to go on like a double date, or no one ever asked me what's going on in my life and things like that. And so you don't have the ability to create that personal connection that you need also to create the avenues you need to be successful in your company. So that's another reason for it, like the authenticity. And then for your own point, if you're authentic and they don't vibe with it, then the only response that you can really have to that is like, that's not the place for me.
Or that's not the person for me. Or that's not the person that should be writing my review. That's not the person that's going to tell, they're not going to advocate for me. They're not going to sponsor me. And guess what? I feel like knowing the people who are not in your corner is just as powerful as knowing the people who are in your corner. That's a data point. That's an important data point.
Honestly, I was just watching Godfather Part 2 again, and I was like, Michael Corleone. I was like, yeah. You got to know where all the players are, right? And then honestly, a lot of times they can become like your biggest, advocates, because sometimes you can turn the person who is the person that you like least into the barometer for what you need to be successful as well.
So you have had this career in tech companies like Apple and Netflix, and now you are in this VC field. You started your own VC. You're working with all these people, I'm sure networking a lot, because fun fact, folks, when you start a VC, it's a lot of networking, a lot of, friendship building. Mm-hmm. So how are you showcasing this confidence and this energy as you build your firm?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm just showing up everywhere, right? When I first started this process, people were like, well, how can you can do this? And I'm like, well, how can I know I can do anything? How could I know I could go to college? How could I know I could, play a sport? Like, how could I know I could be a parent? Like, I've never known I could do anything until I do it, right? It's a simple fact of life. But, it's coming in and knowing, though, that at its base, right, I have the same values in everything I do. Like, I want to do well. Like, I want to learn. I want to be an expert at that thing. I want to, be a force multiplier in every industry I'm in to make sure, that the industry as a whole has the best outcomes. And so, when I know that, right, because like I have such a clear, I always tell people, like, once you find harmony in your life, right, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, alignment. I'm like, it's very difficult to find complete alignment, right? Like, you can't find everything that's going to be like, have the perfect amount of time from a family, from a work, for, my cousins, blah, 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 blah. But you can find like a harmony that works for you, right? And that harmony can change at different points, and then it can really, really, synergistically work out. And so, once you start to find that, it makes it really easy to just go into those other spaces. And so, when I, go into the space, with starting to hear some of the ways people operate, I was just like, no, I don't want to do it that way. And it's really been able to help me distinguish myself from others because, we say, we don't really want to say no to anyone. We want to say, no, but here's some other resources that might make me better at the end, right? And then for other, investors in areas, like here's a whole area of the country that you don't really pay attention to, and perhaps we can give you that insight that you need because it is the most diverse and economically interesting part of this country.
Yeah. And I always tell people I love no and. I never try to tell someone just no. And boundaries are blessings. But I always love to say no and if I can. Because just because I can't do the thing that you're directly asking me to do does not mean that I can't support and help in other ways.
And I was going to say, honestly, enriching your community, right? So, going back to this idea of like, so big D energy also helps when other people think you're cool, right? And so when you help other people and they go, hey, Lexi helped me out, B helped me out. When you're in a room and you need that like little backup and they're in their room, they're going to say, well, I agree with B, right? So that's the other cool thing about paying it forward is that sometimes that can be that other person who can help you enter into that leadership, level for other folks in the space.
So in closing, I'd like you to reintroduce yourselves to us. Who are you?
So this is so funny because I know that like if I had not had so much therapy, this would be a crisis moment. No, I'm joking.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah.
So it's so funny because, my name is Pagels Minor, right? And I am Susie Franklin's baby, number one baby, right? And so Susie Franklin was my mother. I feel like that's the first thing I always think of. Like when people like, are you black? Are you trans? Are you Southern? I'm like, nah, I'm a mama's baby, right? Because that is really my barometer for most things, right? And then after that, I'm just like a truth teller and a dream maker, right? Like that's all I ever want to do, right? I really like this idea of being the person in a space, right? Whether it's in VC or tech or the LGBTQ plus community, being the person who's trying to ask the right questions, who's trying to, uplift the right people. And what I mean by that is that we're all made better when we're all more successful, right? And so it's just really, really nice, being someone who can say like, how can I help you? And that's what I love to do.
I would like to add on to that. I remember meeting you for the first time and we met through a mutual connection. And I remember one of the first things you said to me was you really believe that when everybody gets what they want, everyone is happier. Mm-hmm. And that just makes the world a better place. And it was the first time that someone said that to me so articulately and just so instantly and snappy. And I do want to honor that. Like you are the person that people go to and that you say, how can I help you? Because you genuinely believe that by you helping them, they become a happier and better person. And then they can help someone else. And then therefore there's less oppression in the world. And so I do want to honor that. And thank you for that.
Yes. And that's what my nonprofit gets to do now. It's so crazy. I'm a nonprofit. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that. So the wealth salons, right, so we had two in Chicago. One was focused on women executives. And it was like really interesting because these women were like, we never get to have conversations like this with peers. And the second one was, focused on LGBTQ plus people. But what you said right now just really resonated with me because when I was growing up in Chicago, I was really in a position where I was broke as all get out. I could never afford like a cab. And so like, I'd be like, I'm going to take 4 trains to get back to Northwestern. And some of these people who were there are the ones who took care of me, you know, brought me home and just made sure I was always okay. And one of those folks, you know, she sent me this really long text and she was like, I'm really down because I was just really wondering if I'd done anything. And so I brought her to the side and I said, honestly, thank you for loving me so much until I could love myself. Right. And, you know, and it's really that love now that I'm putting back into the world. And so she was like, you know, you really helped me. She's like, I'm so thankful for you. And I realized that that's what I get high off of. I was like, man, it's like, wow, like these people are some of the greatest people I've ever met. And if they feel that way, imagine what other people feel like. Right. And so to your point, yeah, like I really do believe if we could figure out how to make people feel better, right, feel more hopeful, understand that things are going to be okay if they can really just, you know, work together a little bit more, I think that the world would be better.
Well, in closing, I just want to thank you for always reminding me that I can do it. And I don't know if I've ever told you that. I don't know if you've ever thought that about our relationship, but there have been many times where, because the ancestry exists, that you pop up in my phone at a time where I need someone to tell me that my idea is not crazy, that I will be okay, and that I should keep going. So I want to thank you for that.
Okay. Well, you know, I thank you because, so it's actually funny. I just have to say, I thought Lexi was older than me for a while because her energy is like so auntie energy that I just assume that she had to be older than me, but she's actually younger than me. So I appreciate you for having auntie energy because I'm like, you know, I kind of like the fact that it's like peer, but not peer, but at the same time it works. So I dig that.
I should get a shirt. I love that. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and we'll talk soon.
All right.